Welcome to the Smart CEO Smart Chat. I am Kyra Hardwick, and I am thrilled to be here with you. Thanks for tuning in. We hope that this episode will be an incredible influence on the way that you do the work that you do every day. So let's dig in.
Welcome back, everyone, to yet another episode of the Smart Talk podcast. I am today's host, Alina Conley, and I am the head of learning and impact here at the Kyra Company. And I am joined today by the lovely Nettie Jones, and she is a member of our most recent Smart CEO Accelerator cohort, which is based out of Charlotte. Although Nettie is not, she is coming in from Texas where everything is bigger. I am here in the Atlanta area, and I'm really excited to talk to you, Nettie. It's been a joy having you in the cohort this year, but we want to use this time to really get to know you a little bit better. So I know that you have been a psychotherapist for over 20 years. I would love to learn why you decided to go into this particular field.
Oh, good question. Thank you. I'm excited to be on to talk about my journey. So, you know what, Elena, a lot of people don't know, but I wanted to go to dental school. And I don't know why, I just had this fascination with dentistry. And then in undergrad, one of my professors was like, hey, listen, I don't know that you'll be very competitive. I talked to one of my favorite teachers who happened to be over the behavioral sciences, and she kind of chuckled. And, she was like, but Nettie, you just love these classes so much. And I'm like, you're right, Dr. Ann Owens. And about a week later, I went back in and I said, I'm going to change my major. And my life changed completely. So there was this love for psychology, and I just didn't know it was there. And so after that, I just went to grad school, wrapped up, came back to Houston, Texas, where I live, and start working with a mentor who's been very instrumental on the clinician I am today. Started out with families. So who brings families to therapy, right? Generally moms, women. And so I started off as family and then became like the child whisperer. But Miss Nettie got tired of being on the floor with the colors and the tea sets and all of that, but found it was a natural pull for me to ask women, but how are you? What's going on with you? And if you have kids, the bottom line is what we do that will determine a lot of their behaviors. So getting us to be consistent. So I started working with women. That was a very natural fit for me. That became my sweet spot. That became my niche. And then so with that, the women that I would see often were professional women. And so the life challenges that go with balancing, being in the corporate space, being in the medical field, all of these industries that are very high impact and executive spaces, we found that that's where we were landing in the therapeutic process. How do I move through? How do I keep my sanity? So, of course, with all of that research and all this other kind of stuff, I thought, I've got to put a program together that's comprehensive, that addresses emotional wellness and how it transcends from your personal life and you integrate it into your professional life. And so created a curriculum that I'm excited about, and it's emotional wellness in the workplace. And that's the Vitals model. So I'm the founder of that curriculum and excited about that. So yeah, it's been a journey, almost 30 years in this space. So, but I love what I do, Elena.
Yeah. And we're so grateful that you're doing this work. I think that every year, the work that you're doing becomes more necessary, right? As the world falls apart, we need more Netties. And so I'm excited to hear more about your curriculum that you're building. But, I want to kind of stay here for a little bit and just kind of explore your area of expertise, especially when it comes to women, right? So you talked about
Yes.
how the moms would bring their families to therapy. I have 4 neurodivergent children.
Okay.
So Therapy was introduced to our family very early on, right? So my oldest, who's now 11, I think he had his first therapist at the age of 5, and they've all had some version of therapy. And it has been life changing, right? Especially when
Mhm.
you have children who are medicated and you don't want any of the side effects to take over, who they could
Sure,
become, right?
sure.
I think that, it opened up the gates for me to give myself permission to also go to therapy. As we think about where we are in terms of just like a culture and us kind of
Mhm.
having more cultural norms around just everybody having conversations about what feels really hard. I think that it's putting us in a place where we are starting to evolve, but there is still that stigma, right? And so when you think about the professional women that you're serving, we think about the fact that I think they say upward to 40,000 Black women have lost their jobs over the last year. We
Yes.
really, are in this crucial space of Black women trying to figure out who I am without the title, right? What would you say to that woman who may have never gone to therapy or never had to really process who she is beyond the work environment?
Yeah. Well, let me say this. That is the, question I ask women every time they sit across from me. It's who are
Mm,
you? So we'll come back to
mhm,
that. But, the most important relationship, Elena, is the one we have with ourselves.
mhm,
And a lot of our focus is on our families. It's on our children, it's on our spouse, it's on our careers. And so I encourage women, I have 3 daughters,
mhm,
understand who you are, appreciate you who you are, spend time with yourself, get to know yourself. And that'll allow you to show up differently in the relationships that you have with others. And so, I actually wrote a book specifically focused on women getting to know themselves, owning their truth, transforming their lives intentionally for women who, for whatever reason, thought that maybe therapy was not for them. I think a lot of times we have a misunderstanding of what therapy is. Therapy is just talk therapy. People often ask, how do you sit down and listen to people problems all day? And I don't consider them problems. I'm a listener. I'm a good listener.
mhm,
And I also think I'm just an expert on asking good questions
mhm,
because you know all the answers about Elena, right? You can identify everything about her. You go to the doctor, you're not feeling well. What do? They do labs, they do x-rays, they take you, all of that stuff says to Elena what's going on with Elena. So you're
mhm,
equipped for all of that. So I just asked really good questions. When I wrote the book, it was inspired by clients because oftentimes I would talk to them about getting to understand and know yourself. And they were like, well, what does that mean? The whole thing about loving yourself. But do we really love ourselves if we do some of the things that we do? And so the book is a working book. It allows you to explore. And I ask really simple, but yet sometimes complex questions because it means you have to sit still and be with yourself. And the
mhm.
idea is to understand her so you can appreciate her more, so she shows up better and healthier in the relationships that she's in. And so, it's all full circle for me. It all makes sense. You know how life happens and you do this here, you do that there, you do this here. And then all of a sudden it's like these dots all just kind of all
Mhm.
start connecting and it makes sense. But yeah, the most important person has to be you. And for a lot of women, that's a different mindset.
I think that the pandemic for many people was the first time that they had to sit still enough to hear their own thoughts. And that, either went really well or it went really bad, right? So, why do you think that it is such a challenge for us to sit still?
Well, wow, that's I think there are multiple things. One, some of us are just used to moving. Two, it's sometimes a distraction from yourself. And I've had women tell me if I sit and think too long, I don't think I'll get back up. So a lot
Mm,
of us don't even want to deal with what we need to deal with. It's easier to have another project. It's so much easier to keep moving than to sit and deal with her. I often say things like, you sit still a lot long enough, she speaks. Not audibly, but it's that intuitive nature, it's that knower, it's that when it's like, you shouldn't do that.
Mhm.
That relationship that that you probably should not be in, but yet and still you're like, yeah, but, right?
Mm,
And so, I think it's multiple reasons. And some women don't feel worthy of sitting still. Their
mhm.
value is linked to what they do for others.
That's
So,
good. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about how you then evolved into, even your business model pivoting, or I don't even want to call it a pivot, but just like a next step, right, into your course, wellness in the workplace. I believe you said, I have a coaching practice,
mhm,
and my lane is life coaching, but 90% of the conversation is about work, which I always think
mhm,
is so funny because I'm like, is this your life? To
right.
the point where I was like, well, maybe I should just start working with the companies because that's all people want to talk about anyway, right? So when you think about, that particular lane, right? Because you could have
Mhm.
come up with a ton of programs to support various domains. Why did you lean into workplace well-being?
Primarily based on what you just said. A big
Mhm.
part of who we are is what we do. And
Mhm.
it's unfortunate that we define ourselves by what we do, right? And so if you think about it, if we're working full time, you spend more time at your job with the people at your job than you do sometimes with your families, right? And so the other part about that is, how are we showing up? How are we showing up at work? But then if work is not a good space, how do we show back up at home?
Mhm.
And it kind of all came together for me to take that approach because it did not matter the industry. It was some of the same challenges. If
Mhm.
in fact you say that the most valuable thing to you, what you value the most is family, then why do you spend 70, 80 hours a work week? Why do you
Mhm.
spend that much time working and not at
Mhm.
home with family?
Mhm.
So it gets you to kind of think about what your core values are, right? And so if I honor those things, how I show up at work, and I integrate those important things to me at work, I get more in a better place. And so if I'm in a
Mhm.
better place there, then I come home in a better place. And so it needs to be transient, right? It's not like I'm at home and everything is just wonderful and I'm da 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 da, but then I go to work and it's chaos. So how do
Mhm.
I integrate that there? Going from a practitioner to looking at this multi division wellness space just made sense to me.
Mhm.
So if I'm doing individual therapy, if I'm doing talks, if I'm doing webinars, if I'm doing this education like on an individual level, why not integrate this into a system, a curriculum that is self-guided, it's self-paced, but there are some practical things you do right now, this very moment, to kind of pivot and change how you show up in this space in a healthier way. So it just made sense for me to kind of come up with that. And it's so interesting because for years, I kept saying, I need to do something where I can integrate da 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 da. And this is really what it is. And for women of color, that is very important. We have culturally been nurtured to believe that we have to be better than. So we show up very differently in workspaces. And I think sometimes we show up at the detriment of our physical, emotional, and spiritual, psychological wellness. And so this is an opportunity for people to connect with themselves, understand themselves better so that they know how they show up in the different spaces, in the different roles that they play in their
Yeah.
lives.
I'm glad that you mentioned that because I think that, over time, this kind of weathering, right, and wearing down of the code switching and having to work so much harder,
Yeah,
it literally keeps score in the body, right?
it does.
What
Mhm.
would be the outcomes of someone who is going inward to then be able to show up differently? Like, what is a healthy cycle? place look like at work? Like, can people get there, or is it really just like in today's day and age, it's like, no, I just got to play the game and try to like go to therapy afterwards?
Actually, I think the self-awareness, this is the deal. If I understand that I operate a lot better between the hours of 12 and 3, that makes sense to me, right? And so then that if I'm more creative in that space, then when I go to work, I show up like that, right? If I
Mhm,
know mornings for me are a little slow boogie, then I understand and I know how to pace and move through. If I understand I am more of an introvert as opposed to an extrovert, if I understand that people around me are also very different and how, as an introvert, I work with someone that's an extrovert,
mhm,
this knowledge of who you are just is a tool for you to show up if you choose to, because it's got to be intentional, differently in a workspace. Knowledge
mhm,
is power, right? So it's what I use. I can get all this information, but if I don't use it, it's just no good. And I even share with clients in a therapy session, they may feel really good. The part after the session is what you do with the information, the revelation, the understanding, the insight, the tools. What do you do with the tools? You can just have a really big toolbox with a bunch of nice little shiny tools, but you don't use them. And so, in this course, going in with the intention of understanding who you are, the vitals model, it's values, and it is your interest, and it's your tendencies, it's your activities, your life's mission, and your strength. And all of these, it's like a Venn diagram, they all go together and they're all connected, and you're right there in the middle. And when you integrate all of those and you're able to identify how you show up, you come out the other end of that course more knowledgeable of yourself. You've had some very practical tools to use right then, right away. It's measurable. So you get a chance to see where I came in and how I end up. And it's
mhm,
something that you continue to use throughout. So I'm really excited about the program and the outcome of, but let me tell you something. The self work is not always easy, but it's
mhm,
so worthy and worth it. You're so worthy and worth it.
mhm. Yeah, I love it. So when we think about you taking, this new evolved business model and then
Mhm.
overlaying a program like Smart CEO, what was that experience like for you? Like, how did it shake you up a little bit in all the best ways?
Baby, it shake. Yes, it did. You know what? I love to learn what I don't know.
Mhm,
And that's what this was really about for me, right? Went in very excited of learning, but I had no idea of the growth and the awareness and the potential. I felt like I had the potential, but for you to be with other people and understand that there's a community of support and there are resources that are so available. It was just really, initially, it was overwhelming, but then just to focus little by little, piece by piece, you kind of start to see all of the things kind of come to play. I think, Elena, you and I talked at the very beginning, and I don't know if I shared this, but I think I did. But, years ago, my accountant asked me, was this a business or a hobby?
mm,
Yeah, no, and that was real. And so I feel like I've gone from a solo practitioner to a CEO, the
mm,
mindset, the shift. And being a solo practitioner, I didn't think of it as like this business entity, although I did, but I didn't, right?
mhm,
This
mhm,
allowed me to see that I have to operate this as a business and as a
mhm,
CEO. And no man is an island, and I needed out, additional support. So that's been really good.
mhm, yeah. So when you think about, and we've talked about this, even in your onboarding interview, that the next 12 months, right? And I think that your answer probably has changed now that you have 8 weeks of information. What do you think you really want to focus on in terms of your growth strategy?
Well, you're absolutely right. It has changed. I remember you asked the question. You said, so currently where you are right now with your practice and then growing your business, how does that look? Right. And I was like, oh, well, I'll just lighten up on the practice and dedicate more time towards the wellness in the workplace. And what does that look like? Because if I'm not seeing anybody, then I'm not generating revenue, right? And so what I have had to do is look at what this looks like, look at other opportunities to generate that so that I can still have the flexibility to really focus on this. And so that plan looks very different in a sense that being organized with my time, being able to dedicate specific days for clinical work and then specific days to really focus on the wellness in the workplace. That's necessary, and how I use my time, offloading some of these things. I did get a virtual assistant to kind of help me looking at what marketing looks like, and getting somebody to help and support me in the area of marketing. So expanding in that way. But the strategic planning and putting systems into place and looking at what procurement looks like and, integrating all of those things, and then being able to strategically make sure that, I launch this in a way that's sustainable.
Yeah. One of the things that we talk about a lot within the program is forming collaborations.
Mhm.
But we also talk about ecosystem building. When I think about the conversations that we have in the Kyra company, it's really an ongoing internal conversation that is focused on not just the day-to-day tasks, but really understanding how the task, the programs, the relationships all contribute to what the end goal is, which
Yeah.
is to build communities, to employ people,
Mhm.
right? To strengthen business owners so that they can employ people and grow communities and grow wealth for, our communities. So when you think about your own kind of intrinsic value, I guess, around how your mindset has shifted or how maybe even the end goal has shifted. What does that feel like right now?
Like I said, I just, it's almost like looking at something from like the tunnel view, just like this is it. And then there's this open space, right? So there's just so much more to look at, so many
Mm,
different other ways of viewing things. And I just know through a lot of our webinars, it was things that you don't even consider, right? That you need resources, to your point, this ecosystem. And then to have literally probably most of what you need right there in the cohort, and just being able to connect and find out not only how they can support but how you can support as well. I think one of the challenges for me has been, Elena, is getting out of my head of this is all that I do, right?
mm,
And I do so many other things, right? And to be able, and it's so interesting because I was like, as I'm going through this process, is this whole thing about, okay, so Nettie, you have a really multi division. You have a multiple disciplines kind of all here in one thing. And so this is a business. This is a business model, right?
mhm,
And the awareness that I've been operating like this, but my mindset has still just been on, I'm a therapist. I would we would have guests and you'd ask, okay, put in there your name and what you do. And I would put in Nettie Jones, and then I would put in psychotherapist. But I'm so much more than just a psychotherapist, right?
mhm, mhm,
And so it has allowed me to not minimize the work that I do, and to
mhm,
really fully embrace it, and allow it to just show up in those spaces, because that's what makes what I believe makes what I bring to the table very unique.
mhm.
Is not just being a therapist. I think that adds a huge, it's a big part of it, but I think there's so many other things.
I agree. I love to hear that. So if there's someone listening that, maybe this is 6 months down the line and they're trying to decide if they're going to apply for the next cohort, what would you say to them right now?
Go fill out that application right away. You cannot not afford to do this. You cannot not afford to do this. And let me tell you, Elena, I thought that I had done all my due diligence. Lady, from cybersecurity to AI to insurance. I've got insurance. I got malpractice insurance and all that other kind of stuff, but understanding intellectual properties, business, all that kind of stuff. I'm like, oh my God. And so what you don't know that you need to know, and you need to know it now before you say, I wish I have not had known what I didn't know, and it's a problem. So I said, you can't sleep on this program. You cannot sleep on the opportunity. This has definitely accelerated a lot for me. Like I said, it's been a lot, but I do believe it's also been a training ground for what's next. So I'm excited.
Wonderful. Well, this has been great. I think that I will keep saying to you all, I think that this has been one of our strongest cohorts. And I think that that just kind of speaks to obviously the evolution of our internal company, but really understanding what we're looking for in business owners. And really, it's those of you all who have the ability to shift that mindset from I'm just this to I can be so many things, right? And the moment that I become that version, on the other end, there are so many receiving counterparts that are going to benefit from you being an enterprise version of your company than just, the solo, appointment driven trading time for money, right? And I think that that's the mindset that we're ultimately trying to get CEOs to get to, is the bigger you can get, not from a 2,000 employees mindset, but more so the more that I can scale, the more impact that I can have. And so I'm excited personally to see you in 12 months, 24 months. I think it's going to be a lot of good feedback and you're going to let us know. But I just wanted to thank you for taking the time to share your story and your expertise, and congratulations on completing the program. We get to celebrate you next week.
Thank you, Elena. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
All right, everyone. So if you are listening to this and maybe we're in between cohorts or we have one coming up, you can always visit TKCSmartCEOs.com to learn about our programs and the opportunities for growth stage businesses to scale. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you again, Nettie, and we will see you all on the other side.
Thanks for listening to Smart Chat. Smart CEOs, you are on your way. We hope this episode has been fantastic for you. We are excited that you were here. So here's the deal. Follow us on all of our social media, look up the Kyra Company, and join us on all of our private platforms. We invite you to join our private Facebook group at the Smart CEOs. Jump in, join the conversation, and learn more about what we can do every day to grow our business and grow our community. Thanks so much for joining us. We're excited that you were here. Once again, I'm Kyra Hardwick, and you know it. I was thrilled to bring the Smart Chat to you. Take care. Talk to you soon.